Welcome back to Tips and Tricks. My name is Season Summers, and this is the second video in a series about upward versus downward musical lines and how to tackle that separately in your practice. And we're targeting, of course, Etude number 5, which is our slow etude for the Texas All-State auditions this year. Now, last week's video, we focused on the first 3 lines of the etude. So if you haven't watched that video, I will link that in the description below and you can watch that. Go back and watch that first. And this week, we're going to start at measure 17 and go all the way to the big stop sign at measure 32. And of course, next week, we'll finish and do the final section of the etude. So we're going to tackle up versus down separately. The blue sections are the up, the yellow is the down, and then the purple is the back and forth, the alternating back and forth, and we'll talk about that separately. So just a quick recap. We're talking about voicing, and to keep it really simple, we're using that word to mean where do you feel the vibrations in your body. It should be in this vicinity. So lower I am, the lower it is in my body, more like I'm in my chest cavity. And the higher I am, the more it kind of gets up into my nasal cavity. And of course, it can be anywhere in between. And we're all built differently, so it might be a little different for you than for me, but you can experiment with that because that will certainly help with tone and tuning as we are changing registers, especially on the oboe. So let's start with up. We're actually just going to tackle the first one today because the same idea applies to all of them. So these first 2 notes of measure 19, the D sharp to the B. So the first thing we want to do is take inventory of where you are with the tuning. So if you don't have your oboe, get your oboe ready to go in your reed. And also, would you please get a tuner because we're going to use the tuner to kind of check and see where we are. Okay, now what we want to do is learn the tuning tendencies of our instrument, which will be different from one to the other oboe. There are consistencies sort of within the same types of oboes, but every oboe is unique. And so especially if you're on a new oboe this year, that could be a little bit of a challenge because the notes won't be in the same place as the previous oboe that you had. So let's take the first note that we have in 19, the D sharp. It's a half whole note. Half whole notes on most oboes are going to be sharp, but let's play it. And I want you to just check out the tuner and see what the tuner tells you. If it's sharp, how sharp is it? Okay, so go ahead and play the D sharp. And now let's play it short, like we're going to play it in the context of the music, because that also might change it. So I want you to see if it's different when you play it short compared to what you just played. So mine was definitely higher when I played it short because there's a lot more energy or air pressure going into that. So I know that that's the issue for me, for sure. And then let's check out the high B. This one we don't need to play short. We just can play long because it's long in the context. But it does have an accent and it does need to be energetic. So go ahead and use the air pressure and the vibrato and everything that you're planning to use in the context of the music. And again, don't try to be perfectly in tune. Play it and let's see where the oboe wants it to be. And then we'll fix it if we need to. So go ahead and check your B. Okay, now again, on my oboe, that is working quite well for me today. That's not always the case. So the D sharp is going to be the issue for me, trying to keep the pitch down on that. So normally what the issue is the half whole notes will be sharp, and often the notes above the staff in that side active key register will be a little bit flat on the oboe. Now you might be sharp because you're overcompensating, but it's probably a little flat on your oboe, and that makes the interval too close together, which just doesn't sound right when we play it, okay? So if that's not the case for you, please do what you need to do. Now, let's review. If you're sharp, first of all, make sure you're not biting, right? So don't grab onto the reed so tight, but assuming that's okay and assuming your reed works, less air pressure, or you can also try thinking of moving the vibrations down to a lower part of your body. Just draw your attention to another part of your body. On that note, I'm kind of right here in my mouth cavity. So you could try that if that's different than what you normally feel. And if you're flat, then we do the opposite of that, maybe a little bit more air pressure. And also you can move the vibrations higher in your body. A side note, another thing that often causes people to be flat, students, especially if you haven't taken private lessons consistently, is after you articulate, your tongue should come back. If you articulate and the tongue drops, that will drop the pitch. So especially on the high B, you might hear that you hit it and then the pitch kind of falls a little bit. So if that's the case, just check and make sure that the tip of your tongue didn't hit the reed and then kind of sink down like that, okay? So let's try it in context. I'm gonna put the metronome on 60. I'll count off a measure. We're just gonna play those 2 notes. 1 and 2. Okay? And then where I would go from there with practicing is then just keeping at it, like trying to make the pitches closer and closer to what sounds correct. And remember, we're just trying to be in tune with yourself. So if both of those notes are 10 cents sharp, you're in tune with yourself. Maybe your reed's 10 cents sharp. So we're not trying to make them absolutely perfect on the tuner. That's not a realistic goal, okay? Okay, and then I just wanted to mention briefly before we move on that when you get here to 21, this is just an E minor arpeggio. You don't even have to practice this in the rhythm that's printed. And if you're having trouble with high E, this would be a great place to experiment with different high E fingerings because there's so many different options. You can look up tons of different fingering charts online and find different options, ask your teacher for different options. And what we're looking for is a fingering that gives you confidence so that when you go to that note, you're not afraid of it and that it is pretty reliable and stable. And that, again, differs so much from oboe to oboe. So feel free to experiment with different fingerings for that. Okay, let's move on. Downward's going to be real quick. We have 1 downward line. That's it. And this one's a little easier than the downward lines from last week because the forte carries through here, so the energy keeps building and building as we go lower, which I think makes this a little bit easier. It's not as hard to we don't have to worry about the lower notes coming out. So we're just going to play through that together. And again, you can pause at any spots and check notes when you're practicing by yourself. I'm going to say 1 and we'll breathe on 2 and then come in on the high C. 1 and the only thing I can think of that could be giving trouble to you, besides the fact that E's are often sharp, is this group of 3 notes here, the A sharp, B, E. If you're getting a little squawk in between the B and the E, then just make sure that you get off of the side octave key faster. When you go to the E, if the side octave key is still down, it'll squawk at you. Okay. All right, and then where we really need to look are the donkey lines. Yaw, yaw, back and forth. So we're just gonna focus on measure 17 because it's just octaves. So this is a great reason why most musicians practice octaves and larger intervals in their long tones when they practice daily, okay, is for something like this. So we just have octaves, B to B, C to C, B to B, A to A, and then when we get to the G, then the pattern changes. So we're just looking at this measure for right now. So again, I'm a big fan of let's just play it and don't try to be right and just see what happens so that you know if there's a problem, and then you can figure out what the problem is and come up with a plan of how to fix that. So let's play it one time, stopping on the G, the first note of 24. 1 and 2. Now again, the tendency is going to be a little too sharp on the bottom notes and a little too flat on the top notes, and that you may not have that problem at all, but that's the kind of the abnormal problem that I hear, and the intervals are too close together. So you can practice just A octaves, B octaves, C octaves, figuring that out separately before you tackle measure 23, right? And you could also break this down and do something like, and there, something along those lines, right? You could break it up in different ways. So get creative. Don't just play straight through it and then feel worried or stressed about it. Okay, these are the same tips as last week. So if you watched last week's video, you already know what I'm going to say, and you can fast forward, or you can stay here with me. Basically, again, just to recap, make sure you think about, am I going up or am I going down, and what do I need to do to make that line work? For voicing, where do you feel the sound in your body? And you can change that and get different results from how you're playing. So keep that in mind. Make sure you have a stable reed when you're working on this. So does it crow a C? Can I play octaves in tune with minimal effort, physical effort? Check those things. If that's not the case, I would get another reed, or maybe ask a teacher to fix your reed if they can. Practice with a drone, right? Having a pitch playing so you can listen in tune is so much better for you developing as a musician, developing your ears, than it is to just stare at the tuner. But looking at the tuner does, work really well for a lot of things. And then the final tip is just to practice singing. That's a really great way. If you can sing it in tune, then that means that you are hearing it correctly, and then you're much more likely to play it correctly on your oboe. Okay, guys, that is it for today. So next week we'll finish Etude 5 with the ups and downs, doing the last section, last third essentially of this Etude. So if you have any questions or comments or anything in special that you want me to cover, if you'll leave that in the comments below, I will address that in the video when I make it next week. All right, guys, thanks so much. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you next Friday. Bye-bye.